Australian crocodile hunter Steve Irwin has died during a diving expedition near Port Douglas in Australia.
Well, it's reported the environmentalist was killed after being stabbed by a stingray barb in the chest while filming an underwater documentary on the Great Barrier Reef.
Have you wondered what happens to the children of a man the whole world thought of as larger than life, long after the cameras stopped rolling and the grief settled in? Steve Irwin, the wildlife icon known across the globe as the Crocodile Hunter, died in 2006 after a stingray barb pierced his heart during a filming accident in Queensland, leaving behind a wife and two young children. 2 decades later, those children are no longer the wide-eyed kids running around Australia Zoo. They are adults now, carrying his name into spaces nobody saw coming, and what they have built since then might surprise even longtime fans. The family Steve Irwin left behind. Steve Irwin was born Stephen Robert Irwin on February 22, 1962, in Upper Ferntree Gully, Victoria, and grew up at the small Birwa Reptile Park his parents opened in Queensland in 1970, the wildlife park he would eventually expand into Australia Zoo. In October 1991, an American visitor named Terry Raines, who had grown up in Eugene, Oregon, and had spent years running a wildlife rehabilitation center called Cougar Country, walked into Steve's family park while touring Australia with friends. The two married less than a year later, on June 4, 1992, in Terry's hometown, and rather than take a conventional honeymoon, they spent it filming a crocodile relocation in far north Queensland, footage that became the very first episode of The Crocodile Hunter. The couple welcomed their daughter, Bindi Sue Irwin, on July 24, 1998, followed by their son, Robert Clarence Irwin, on December 1, 2003. Both children grew up almost entirely within Australia Zoo, appearing on camera alongside their parents from a remarkably young age, as The Crocodile Hunter grew into a global phenomenon broadcast in more than 130 countries. In 2002, Steve and Terry founded Wildlife Warriors, a non-profit organization built to fund conservation projects and animal rescue efforts, a cause that would eventually outlive Steve himself by decades and remains active today. When Steve died on September 4, 2006, after the barb of a short-tailed stingray pierced his chest while he filmed an underwater documentary near Port Douglas, Bindi was 8 years old, and Robert had just turned 2. Terry Irwin's own Wikipedia page documents how she chose to keep Australia Zoo running rather than step away from public life, a decision she has described as fulfilling a promise she made to Steve to make sure the zoo continued no matter what happened to him. A public memorial service held in the zoo's 5,500-seat Crocodile drew an estimated 300 million television viewers worldwide, and attendees were asked to donate to Wildlife Warriors instead of sending flowers. Terry later released a memoir, My Steve, in 2007, and the following year she launched Steve Irwin Day, an annual tribute held every November 15th at Australia Zoo that doubles as a fundraising event for ongoing conservation work. She became a naturalized Australian citizen on that same date in 2009. Timing her citizenship ceremony to coincide with the tribute as a deliberate gesture toward the country and the husband she had built her entire adult life around. In the years since, Terry has spoken candidly about choosing not to date again, telling interviewers in 2024 that she had already lived her happily ever after with Steve and felt content being on her own rather than lonely. Both Bindi and Robert spent their childhoods almost entirely in front of cameras, a choice that drew criticism from some corners of the public who questioned whether two grieving kids should have been filmed so soon after losing their father. Bindi had already appeared with Steve before his death and launched her own program, Bindi the Jungle Girl, within roughly a year of losing him, while Robert grew up more gradually into the family business, eventually becoming known for his photography and his willingness to handle some of the zoo's most dangerous animals on camera in a style that visibly echoed his father's fearless approach. What almost nobody expected is just how far each of these two kids would eventually travel beyond the zoo's gates while never actually leaving the family mission behind. But before either sibling could build the adult identities the public knows today, both had to survive very different struggles hiding just beneath the surface. And what they eventually revealed about those struggles changed how the world saw them entirely. Bindi Irwin's path, from wildlife warrior to mother and patient. Bindi Irwin met professional wakeboarder Chandler Powell in 2013 when he visited Australia Zoo, and the two eventually married there in a small ceremony in 2020. The couple welcomed their daughter, Grace Warrior Irwin Powell, in March 2021, and Bindi has spoken often about wanting Grace to grow up surrounded by the same conservation values that shaped her own childhood. For years afterward, Bindi appeared to be managing the demands of motherhood, zoo work, and a long-running family reality series called Crikey. It's The Irwins, which aired from 2018 through 2022, with the same steady composure fans had watched her display since she was a child. Behind that composure, Bindi was quietly enduring a health crisis that had gone undiagnosed for more than a decade. She has since revealed that she suffered for roughly 10 years with severe unexplained pain that doctors repeatedly dismissed as a normal part of being a woman, before finally being diagnosed with endometriosis in 2023. The condition led to a series of surgeries, and by 2025 she disclosed that more than 50 lesions, along with a chocolate cyst and her appendix, had been removed from her body over a 3-year span, alongside a separate surgery to repair a hernia connected to Grace's birth. Bindi chose to make her struggle public in a deeply personal way, sharing hospital photos in March 2026 and writing candidly about feeling trapped in her own body during the years before her diagnosis. Her openness turned her into one of the more visible advocates for endometriosis awareness within celebrity media. And E! News reported on the health update Terry and Robert gave at the 3rd annual Steve Irwin Gala, describing how Bindi was finally improving after years of pain. By the spring of 2026, her family confirmed she was doing significantly better, though ongoing travel remained difficult enough that she missed the gala in person for the first time, staying home in Australia and easing back into wildlife conservation work at her own pace rather than rushing back into a full public schedule. Bindi's recovery has unfolded alongside a renewed focus on the hands-on parts of conservation work that matter most to her, including caring for the zoo's crocodile population and supporting the wider operation her mother now oversees day to day. Robert has explained that Bindi's presence carries real weight given the scale of what the family manages, noting that Australia Zoo employs roughly 500 staff members across close to 500,000 acres of conservation land. Even during her most difficult stretches, Bindi has stayed connected to the mission her parents built, finding it ironically easier on her body to spend time with the animals at home than to travel for public appearances abroad. Her journey has reshaped how fans see her public persona, shifting attention away from the cheerful wildlife presenter image she carried as a child and toward a more complex picture of a woman who suffered quietly for years while still appearing on camera and continuing her conservation work. Advocates for women's health have pointed to her openness as part of a broader cultural shift in how chronic conditions like endometriosis get discussed publicly, especially when the person sharing has as large a platform as Bindi has built over the years. Yet while Bindi was working through her own private battle, largely outside the spotlight, her younger brother was about to step directly into one of the brightest spotlights in American television, and almost nobody expected just how far he would go. Robert Irwin's rise from camera-shy kid to reality TV champion. Robert Irwin spent much of his childhood as the quieter Irwin sibling, often appearing in family footage beside his mother, Terry, and his older sister, Bindi, but rarely commanding the same level of public attention that Bindi enjoyed from such a young age. While Bindi naturally stepped into the spotlight through television appearances, public speaking engagements, and conservation projects, Robert was more often seen observing from the sidelines, developing his own interests and confidence away from the intense public focus that had followed the Irwin family since the days of the Crocodile Hunter. Even so, He was growing up in an environment unlike any other, surrounded by wildlife, conservationists, and the enduring legacy of his father, Steve Irwin. As Robert entered his teenage years, that dynamic began to shift. He gradually took on more prominent roles within Australia Zoo's wildlife programming and educational initiatives, demonstrating a natural ability to communicate with audiences while remaining true to his passion for animals. Viewers quickly noticed that he had inherited many of the qualities that had made his father famous: enthusiasm, fearlessness, and a genuine love for wildlife. At the same time, Robert developed his own distinct identity. Rather than simply following in Steve's footsteps, he expanded his interests into wildlife photography, earning praise for striking images that showcased both artistic talent and a deep appreciation for the natural world. His growing confidence on camera also made him a familiar face to television audiences. Whether handling crocodiles, venomous snakes, birds of prey, or other challenging animals, Robert displayed remarkable composure and knowledge for someone so young. Over time, he evolved from being known primarily as Steve Irwin's son into a recognizable conservation advocate in his own right. His social media presence, public appearances, and wildlife work helped introduce him to a new generation of fans, many of whom admired both his dedication to conservation and his approachable personality. In 2025, however, Robert embraced a challenge that had nothing to do with crocodiles, reptiles, or wildlife education when he joined the cast of Dancing with the Stars for its 34th season. The decision surprised some observers, but it also provided an opportunity for audiences to see a different side of him. The timing carried unmistakable emotional significance for the Irwin family, as his older sister Bindi had won the same competition exactly a decade earlier in 2015 alongside professional dancer Derek Hough. Her victory had become one of the most memorable celebrity performances in the show's history, creating inevitable comparisons as Robert prepared to compete. Paired with professional dancer Whitney Carson, Robert quickly emerged as one of the season's standout contestants and a favorite among viewers. Week after week, he impressed audiences with his willingness to learn, his positive attitude, and the steady improvement in his performances. Beyond the dancing itself, many fans connected with the personal story he brought to the competition. Reports indicated that during some of the most demanding weeks of rehearsals, Robert found comfort in wearing one of Steve Irwin's old shirts, a touching reminder of the bond he still felt with his late father. The gesture resonated deeply with audiences, reinforcing the sense that while Robert had forged his own path, he continued to carry his father's legacy with him in everything he pursued. The season built toward a finale on November 25, 2025, where Robert and Carson faced 4 other finalist pairs, including social media personality Alex Earle, gymnast Jordan Childs, actress Elaine Hendricks, and Dylan Efron, the younger brother of actor Zac Efron. Robert competed through the finale while managing a painful rib injury that forced the pair to adjust choreography for their freestyle routine, and despite finishing a single point behind Earle and her partner on the judges' scorecard, the combined weight of more than 72 million public votes carried Robert and Carson to the win. ABC News covered the emotional aftermath of the victory, noting how Robert described following in his sister's footsteps as something that had meant everything to him. The win gave the Irwin family a rare distinction, making them the first family in the show's history to produce 2 separate season champions a decade apart. Robert later reflected that his sister had said it best when she told him the win would change his life, language that captured just how closely the 2 siblings had tracked each other's biggest public milestones despite living such different day-to-day lives. Carson herself noted that the victory felt different from her first championship years earlier, since she now had a husband and 2 young children of her own watching from the audience, adding another layer of family meaning to an already emotional night for everyone involved. For Robert, the victory marked a turning point in how the public perceived him, shifting his image from the zoo's quieter younger sibling into a recognized television personality with a fan base entirely his own. He has continued to describe himself first and foremost as a wildlife warrior, insisting in interviews that his father's mission remains the foundation of everything else he does, even as his media career expands into entirely new territory beyond Australia Zoo. Just when it seemed like the Irwin family's story had reached a natural high point, attention quickly turned toward what both siblings planned to do next, and that next chapter says a great deal about where this family is actually headed. The legacy continues: Australia Zoo, Grace Warrior, and what comes next. With Bindi managing her recovery from home and Robert riding the momentum of his Dancing with the Stars win, the Irwin family's public-facing operation has settled into a new rhythm built around shared responsibility rather than a single dominant figure. Terry Irwin, now in her early 60s, continues to oversee Australia Zoo's day-to-day operations, while her two adult children take on increasingly visible roles in both the conservation work and the media projects that keep the family name in front of new audiences around the world. Robert has continued expanding his media presence well beyond the dance floor, balancing zoo responsibilities with international filming commitments that have taken him as far as South Africa for additional television projects following his DWTS win. He has also stepped into hosting duties for a spin-off production tied to the Dancing with the Stars franchise, building a media career that runs parallel to, rather than in competition with, his conservation responsibilities back home in Queensland. Bindi, meanwhile, has leaned into a quieter chapter centered on her daughter Grace, who turned 5 in 2026, and on rebuilding her physical strength enough to resume the hands-on wildlife work that first defined her public identity as a child. Hello! Magazine has tracked the family's recent milestones closely, including Bindi's ongoing recovery and the family's continued celebration of Steve Irwin Day, an annual tribute that keeps his memory active in both Australian and international conservation circles nearly 20 years after his death. The publication's coverage has also noted how Terry continues describing her late husband's influence as more relevant than ever, given the scale of environmental challenges facing the current generation. The Steve Irwin Gala itself has become a fixture on the family's calendar, now in its third year as a fundraising event held in Las Vegas to support wildlife warriors. Robert and Terry attended the 2026 edition without Bindi, who remained home in Australia, but the event still drew a wide circle of family friends and fellow celebrities, underscoring how far the Irwin name has traveled into mainstream entertainment culture while never losing its conservation roots. Inspire More reported on the gala's most recent edition, describing Robert's tribute to his father's enduring passion and the gathering's continued role in honoring Steve's original mission. Robert publicly thanked attendees the following day, calling the night a room full of friends and family gathered to celebrate his father's life and legacy. Terry has also continued building on her husband's environmental fights well outside the cameras of reality television, including a long-running campaign that successfully stopped bauxite strip mining on the Steve Irwin Wildlife Reserve and ongoing partnerships with Australian universities studying everything from koala microbiomes to frog disease at the Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital, the rescue and rehabilitation center Steve dedicated to his own late mother in 2004. That hospital now treats more than 10,000 native Australian animals every year, a figure that places the zoo's conservation footprint far beyond what most fans see in entertainment headlines about Robert's dancing or Bindi's recovery. Even amid health struggles, television wins, and an expanding media footprint, the Irwin family's center of gravity has remained remarkably consistent. Every major milestone in Bindi and Robert's adult lives, from marriages and births to televised championships and public health battles, eventually circles back to Australia Zoo and the conservation mission their parents built from almost nothing decades earlier. That consistency may be the most surprising part of the entire story, since fame, illness, and the passage of time could easily have pulled two siblings in very different directions, yet both have chosen, again and again, to root their adult identities in the same place where their childhoods began. What makes the current chapter of the Irwin family story so unexpected is not any single headline, but the cumulative picture it creates. A daughter who spent a decade hiding chronic pain has become one of the more outspoken advocates for women's health within celebrity media. A son, once known mainly as the quieter sibling, has become a national television champion following almost the exact same path his sister carved a decade earlier. Both still call Australia zoo home. Both still answer to the same conservation mission their parents built from nothing, and both have shown in very different ways that growing up in the shadow of a global icon did not stop them from building identities entirely their own. Steve Irwin's children are grown now, carrying grief, illness, fame, and purpose in equal measure. And the version of their story unfolding in 2026 looks nothing like what anyone watching them as kids could have predicted. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss a video. Drop a comment below and tell us which sibling's journey surprised you more. And share this with someone who grew up watching the Irwin family on television.